G'day everyone, it's Kelvin here from Shedding Sheep New Zealand. Now I've actually had a bit of an interesting afternoon, something that a little bit unusual, but I've got to come and help a man who has had shedding sheep or Wiltshires for the last 30 years. Now his Facebook page is Arvidson Wiltshires, is that correct? It is Arvidson Wiltshires?
That's right.
Arvidson Wiltshires. And he's got a few videos on there. I really enjoy them. But the one thing that they lack is his face. And so he's kind of like, in racing terms, he's like the Stig of Wiltshires because you never get to see his face. But I did suggest that seeing his face might be a good idea. And we're going to have just a very small chat with him. I've got some footage throughout the day, so I'm going to splash and put together a couple of videos of what we've talked about today, because there's some really good stuff, and it's going to be a bit tricky for me to make sure that it's in the correct context, because there's parts of discussions that we've had. I didn't have the camera on the whole time, but there is some really interesting stuff for both the lifestyle block holders and for the big commercial farmers and the woolly farmers who are considering moving to Wiltshires. David, great afternoon.
Yeah,
I've had a great time. And I know you're a little bit camera shy, so I will put some footage of your sheep as well, because I walked around your rams and bits and pieces. There are a couple of questions that I really would like answered, which we haven't covered too much today. And before Wiltshires, what was your involvement with sheep? What were you doing?
I hadn't had a lot of involvement with sheep. I started off dairy farming, then I sort of skipped that and went back to uni and did a degree in agricultural economics with the idea of perhaps being a bit more of a office body. Then my father-in-law took crook. He had a small block of 150 acres with woolly sheep on it.
Okay.
After a couple of years, he realised and we realised he wasn't really going to come back to health to run it anymore. So at that point, well, to skip back a bit, when I was doing my ag economics degree, I'd been in the library and going through sheep breeds of New Zealand, just, when you're trying to distract yourself from what you should be doing.
I'm very good at that.
Yeah, so I was going through that book, and to skip back even further, part of the farm induction course I did as a 18-year-old before dairy farming, they put us out in the back blocks of Kaikoui, 40-degree heat in summer, in a tin shed, crutching the back ends of dirty fly-blown lambs. And it was that point where I basically swore that I never wanted to see the back end of another sheep again in my life. And then skipped forward again to the library at Massey there, where I saw sheep breeds in New Zealand, and here was this breed that basically didn't need shearing. So at that stage they'd really only been in the country, well, that was 1990, so they'd only really barely been in the country for much more than 10 years. Yeah, and then skip forward another 5 years to where we realised my father-in-law wasn't going to be able to carry on with the sheep. And so I suggested, well, how about I do a project on here with a breed that I'd be a little bit interested in. And so, yeah, 30 years later, I'm still playing with that breed and trying to... The aim at the start, I just said, right, I enjoy the numbers side of it to a degree, so let's run it as a stud and see if we can get this breed ready for if commercial farmers ever really take an interest in it.
Where did you find stock back there then, if they hadn't been around very long?
The guy that bought them, and he was selling them off to various farmers, and I found Jim Wilson up at Paparoa, just north of Auckland. He was basically retiring to some degree out of farming and was trying to sell his flock.
Yep.
Yeah, so we bought his flock off him.
How many sheep?
From there, it was about 120, 25.
So a reasonable number. You actually did start with
it wasn't too bad a number, but
at that time.
Huge variability in there, Yeah. He had started to dabble with putting a little bit of Texel in, so there was a bit of Texel in some of the offspring. So big variation, some of those animals, even when they were shedding, we were trying to shed off 150 mil of wool. Right. So, it looked pretty rough. But, it's given us a big range of genes in the flock, and that allows us to sort of select for whatever direction we want to go in. The traditional Wiltshire was quite a lean goat-like animal, not a lot of meat between the back legs or anything like that. Whereas that little bit of texel in there gave a bit more width across the back. The short loin was a bit wider, and obviously more muscle down the hind quarters. We haven't done a huge amount of work focusing on that, because when the commercial farmers started to ring up and looking for them, pretty much their first question was, are you breeding for facial eczema tolerance? So after a few years of having these things, and I think we started, we were selling about 10 to 15 rams a year initially. The blocks that supported us were actually the lifestyle blocks. So the lifestyle blocks were good. They gave us the cash flow to actually develop things like the facial eczema development work with the breed.
Yeah, so you started sort of, because as we discussed earlier, the lifestyle guys just clicked to Wiltshires, went, well, they don't have to be shorn, they're reasonably parasite resistant, so what?
Yeah.
I don't have a shearing plan, I want a few sheep, I want to have some mutton in my freezer. It's a no-brainer.
Yeah, and the wool income to them off, somewhere between 5 and 20 sheep was next to nothing. And normally the shearer would take the wool plus $100 or whatever for shearing the 10 sheep. So so the wool was meaningless to them.
Yeah.
And they just wanted something that was less hassle. They didn't want to be calling in someone every 6 weeks to dip them or deal with fly blow or whatever. So
yeah. And then the lifestyle guys were still buying them, because you still provide animals in that price range.
Yeah.
And the commercial guys said, hey, yeah, I want these. Facial eczema, shedding, sell me sheep.
Yeah, and the main commercial guys that were coming in were mainly shearers.
Yeah, now, that was a question that was actually asked. So in the early days, a lot of them were the shearer guys buying them.
Yeah, and they were simply saying, well, we don't want to pay someone else for shearing our sheep. And in 10 years' time, when I hit 60, I don't want to be shearing them myself either.
Yeah.
So, so the bulk of them were either shearers or ex-shearers, that sort of thing.
Well, you've covered a couple of my questions without me even asking, because I was going to go, what is the decision? Because I've asked a lot of people, and of course a lot of people have been farmers of woolly sheep, but like you, and then, but on a smaller scale, you of course were a small scale, and then went, I don't want to do this anymore. It's not cost effective for me to grow wool. But do you actually hate wool?
No, like, I was building houses around Auckland, and I would purposely buy wool carpets. I built a new house for myself, and I put wool carpets through it. I love, like especially possum merino mix and all that sort of thing. I love the product. Yeah, brilliant.
But it just doesn't make money.
Well, it's like my father-in-law. I thought he would spit the dummy at the idea of these sheep coming on, because he had basically made his living out of shearing.
Yep.
And he just looked me in the eye and said, they're not paying us for it, why do it?
Correct.
So I thought, oh, well, there's a green light, go for it.
Now, a long time ago, in the 90s, I was a teenager, and I had Romney flock, my own little Romney flock back then, and I had to sell them because I had to become an adult. That was sometimes
What's the connection?
I had to have the off-farm job because of the farm model and the family model.
Oh yeah.
So that was my decision. But back then, shedding sheep were not at all anywhere near mainstream, and I still don't think they're mainstream.
No.
How much of a hard time did you get given?
Yeah, there were neighbours who would look across and just sort of, tut. Fortunately, we were on the edge of Auckland, and so, with so many lifestyle blocks, they just all sort of said, yeah, brilliant, let's go for it.
Right.
But a lot of my customers, even now, it's a very fresh memory for them, the hard time they were given in their community for being such a traitor. Yeah. But it's amazing how many of their neighbours have now bought from these people.
And this is fascinating, because I see, and I've heard the stories and talked to people, and they say, well, no, I was we were the first place in the valley to get the shedding sheep.
Yeah.
And the neighbours gave us a bit of a hard time, and then the next one converted, and the next one converted, and the next one, and now the whole valley has got shedding sheep.
Yeah, a lot would just put them in a back paddock where the neighbours simply couldn't see them and try and pretend they didn't have them.
I've heard those stories.
Yeah.
Plenty of those where they were just tucked behind the wool shed and no one knew.
Yeah, and it's perfectly understandable, because farmers, everything is so cyclic. You're up one year, down the next for price for products and all that sort of thing. If you try and chop and change every time something looks like it's not going to make money, you're always buying in something that is making money and is expensive.
Correct.
And then selling it when it's cheap and worthless. And that's the fastest way out to go broke. Yeah. So it's understandable, the thinking, but the thing that really triggered me onto their future potential, it was actually the Meat and Wool Board Compendium of Facts from about 1988. They had a brilliant graph in there, and it simply showed in real dollars, so everything converted into 1990 dollars. And this graph ran from 1950 to 1990, and it had the wool price through to today's, right? And it showed the yearly movement.
Yep.
When you compress 50 years onto a graph that size, you don't even see those yearly fluctuations in price.
Correct.
And it was a straight line in one direction.
Yep.
Now, one thing we were regularly trying to do in our stats classes in economics was to try and fit a trend line to data. Well, with this, you didn't have scattered data to fit a trend line to. There was just a straight line there. So it was very, in your face. If you looked at that graph and said, right, this is 50 years, what's going to turn this around from hitting below zero? And there was nothing on the horizon that said it was going to turn around. No. It would have basically taken a government edict to pass rules and regulations basically fully banning synthetics, oil-based products, and you wouldn't be allowed to import them either. It would have been very strict to try and save it. And even then, to only do that in New Zealand, well, New Zealand wasn't the main market for wool anyway.
No.
So it was never going to save the existing industry. It would only save a portion of it. And I wouldn't mind if they did that in the future, because I don't like the idea of plastic particles from our clothes in the washing machine going into the sea every day, So
wool is not a New Zealand problem. Wool is an international problem. And the price of wool is an international problem.
Yeah, well, the other thing you've got to look at, when I saw that graph, I thought, okay, if you superimpose the cost of labour onto that graph, where's the crossover point?
Yeah.
And when I did that, we were at the crossover point back in 1990.
Yeah, so right now I think there are some farmers who come to me and they'll say that their wool check will pay for the shearing. But that's not factoring in your labour, as you say, and all the other associated costs, the additional fly strike issues, the crutching, all those other associated costs of wool, the transport of the wool off the farm, not included.
Yeah.
It pays for the shearer alone, and that's because we've just come up from 2 years ago, slightly. I actually think that that shedding sheep are the answer to wool, one of the answers to wool's problems. And what I find really interesting is I think we're all on the same team. If you have a business and you both sell the same product, and one business stops selling it,
the other one gets a boost.
The other one, yes, gets the boost. And this is what wool. So the woolly guys give the shedding guys a bit of a hard time, but they're actually doing them a favour. Yeah,
especially if we take out the stuff that isn't such high value.
Absolutely. We need to get rid of the stuff that's not good value, high value. Well, that needs to go. So farmers, I think, really need to look at their true costings. And I've had more of my woolly friends, my woolly farming friends, come to me and say, hey, well, what's with this? What's with the shedding? Because they know that I'm around and I've been travelling and meeting people like yourself. So they're asking those questions, and there's that interest happening because they can see that maybe there's something
people
better.
People are a lot more open now. They're realising that, hey, it's not a short-term trend.
Yeah.
They're on to it now.
I've pretty much answered most of the questions. We could go on to the size of sheep, but we've kind of discussed that, and a little bit during our day. I might be able to get the footage on that. But what I'm going to ask David to recount a little bit a memory that he has of me, and I might have been a little bit of a keyboard warrior, but no, I actually attended his sale in 2022, and his ram sale. And he didn't punch me in the face when I turned up here today. Tell the story.
Okay, yeah, so COVID shut down my existing sale method because everyone was coming up to Auckland to buy from us, up in the Bombay Hills. And all of a sudden with COVID, they put a ring fence around Auckland and said no one's allowed in. So that was the end of my sales. So that year I just ran a few police barriers and got down to Tikwiti and sold some down there and a few down at Napier to keep things afloat, and sent a bunch off by truck to people that would order them that way. And then the following year we shifted the sale to Taupo, and to be more central so that I didn't have to run between Tikwiti and Napier. And then some smart aleck put online there, look at this guy, what he's putting in here. He's got some sheep in here that have got wool on their back. Isn't that a shocker? Fancy putting shedding sheep out with wool on their back. Which, of course, my instant response is, well, what a moron, doesn't he realise it's going to fall off in a month's time? But I thought about it, and I thought, well, he's right, People have looked through those sheep, and they haven't bought those ones with a touch of wool on, and that is most likely because they don't fully understand the cycle that the sheep go through, and they don't realise that something that molts in November, December can be just as good or better than something that molts in September, October. So anyway, I changed what I was doing, and I put a far more consistent line into the Taupo sale this year, and now someone is hitting me up for commission.
Yep, because as prices increased.
We got a rise in our average sale price. And
yes.
So,
and we've had discussions today about what I believe the buyers are after. So I'm going to be interested to see if that actually happens in your sale. I'm not going to talk about quite what we discussed because it's something that I've talked about a little bit with Wiltshires, and we're going to see your selection. We've gone through your rams. We had a bit of a look today, and David has allowed me to come here, and I've seen all his rams, and he does something a bit different where he keeps all of his male sheep to get some depth of data, and so that's something.
Warts and all.
Yeah, warts and all. So he's showed off everything. And then down the track, he's going to make a selection of these rams. And there's some we could talk about that. Those are leaving, that one's leaving. We didn't get into the feet. And there's some other things I think that we're going to get together when he's doing another selection and go through and look at some of the selection process, hopefully. As long as I don't say anything mean about him again. No, actually,
if it's profitable, I don't mind.
Correct, and I will just open my mouth and put it out there. I looked at some of his leftover rams. He's still got a few rams up there for sale. If anyone's looking for late in the season rams,
still about 50 in that mob.
Which and that's not a reflection of the sheep quality. It's a reflection of the market and how this year we've had a lot of Wiltshires.
Well, actually, our sales are ahead of last year, but my policy has always been to keep more than what I sell the year before, because I don't want someone coming in and only having a choice of half a dozen rams. That if it was just a half a dozen, they would be the duds. If they're coming in and they're still 30, 40, 50, even 20 rams, if there's a nice selection there,
There's some goodies up there. There's the ones I really like. I didn't look at data. I was just looking, of course, on the composition of those rams, and it looks really good.
Yeah.
So hopefully I'm going to be... It's about a 40-minute drive back to my place. Hopefully we can come down and we can have a look over again, and trying to understand a little bit about David's farming style. I'd like to talk about the fact that you've got the different farms as well, just to understand that, and the pressures you can put on sheep. We'll see what I can belt out with the footage I've got today. But it's been hopefully I've been helpful, and it's been a fantastic day. Actually, I've really enjoyed talking to you.
Yep.
And I've got a lot of respect for the fact that you've been doing this for 30 years.
Yeah.
So there's that, and I think a lot of people will enjoy what you have to say. And thank you very much for showing your face.
You're welcome.
Hey, talk to you later. Thank you.
Good.